Periodically, as I think up videos for this channel, the conversation comes up of the greatest sci-fi film of all time, and the usual suspects tend to get mentioned. Well, 2001 of course. How about Interstellar, Blade Runner, Alien? And then there is often a quiet voice at the back of my mind that whispers, "Do you remember Gattaca?" And I pause and nod as I remember this critical darling of the sci-fi world. Yeah, that was a really good film. So today I want to take a look back and see if this film still lives up to its reputation. A brief synopsis. In the not too distant future, we live in a eugenics-dominated dystopian world in which your future worth can essentially be read from birth based upon your DNA. Our protagonist, Vincent Freeman, played by Ethan Hawke, has been consigned to work as a janitor, while above his head he watches the rockets take off from Gattaca space station. Their intention is to expand the horizons of human existence by making a successful mission to the moons of Saturn, something that is not on the cards for Vincent due to his inferior genetic makeup, but something that he nonetheless dreams about taking part in, and for which he is willing to commit himself completely and even commit identity theft in order to achieve. And this is the backbone of the movie. Can this guy overcome the fate that this eugenicist society has laid out for him and attain his dream? Some people have interpreted this struggle as willpower versus genetics, but I don't think this quite fits. And as I'll explain, I think this is one area in which the film doesn't quite deliver on its promises. So this is a beautifully simple and fascinating premise to base a film on. It harkens back to our ages-old discussion of nature versus nurture, but provides a modern update that feels really relevant to the times that we live in. I think much of Gattaca's good reputation is staked on this idea. But for me, in the way that this question was explored in the film, it felt like a premise that promised more than it delivered. If it's a question of Vincent pitting his will against his genetics, I was left with questions of, well, where does this will come from? It must come from within him. And if it comes from within him, then in this supposedly hyper-futuristic world in which we can read people's fates like tea leaves, surely it would be accounted for when they read his DNA. I've seen some reviewers talk about the religious imagery in the film, and yeah, maybe I'm under-reading that, but for me it just wasn't quite there. The premise was a vehicle for great one-liners like, "I didn't leave anything for the swim back," but ultimately didn't explore the nature versus nurture idea in a really elucidating way. Another criticism I had was the major clunkiness of some of the plot exposition. Vincent has to work hard to not leave a trace of DNA anywhere while he's undercover at Gattaca, and so we have lots of scenes of him meticulously scrubbing himself, combing his hair and cleaning his workplace, and I just saw this and thought, no way, there's no way this would work. How much skin and hair do we shed every minute of every day without even noticing? And I get it, it's a plot device, and I'm usually forgiving about plot devices. They don't need to be flawless, it's okay to help the narrative along with a bit of clunky exposition. But this film has asked me to believe we are in a hyper-futuristic society. It stakes its whole identity on this notion. And the idea that we would have a society so futuristic that we can read a person's future from birth, and yet in which whole-scale identity theft of this type is somehow still possible, absolutely should not work. Not to mention the hilarity of random, giant strands of hair being perfectly placed in order to help the plot along. And yet, it's still a thrill to watch. There's a brilliant accidental irony to a film that has such terrible genetics in the form of inaccuracy and gaping plot holes, that it's a thrill to watch it somehow take off and defy its genetic limitations. Niccol had to be really creative in his choices of locations to get the perfect sense of a near-future dystopia. He picked out Frank Lloyd Wright buildings, architectural gems of our world that feel like they belong to our future, and it gives the film a real sense of identity that is missing in many a CGI fest. Even if his grasp of eugenics felt off, I loved that Niccol thinks big. And I kind of love that his hodgepodge of encyclopedia science feels so homemade. I loved the humanness of it. I love feeling the genetic imprint of a director as opposed to the sanitized, 10 steps removed influence of the studio as we see in many a modern sci-fi film. Yeah, so that's my take on Gattaca. Let me know your thoughts. I hope you like and I hope you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.